for anyone listening to this, like how can they train themselves to think more critically in this era? Because it seems like, well, not even seem like, but there is a lot of misinformation that's happening. So since we're talking about feelings, you get this information, you're so attached to this feeling of what this information or misinformation would be, and then it kind of clouds the thinking. So how does one train themselves to become more of a critical thinker?
Yeah, it comes back to desire again. And I hate to say it because the hard fact is very few people desire this, statistically speaking. And we know this. I mean, we could look at our recent history, and there are things that people like, it's so clearly false information, but by believing it and accepting it, these people believe that good things will come to them, so they don't care. And
Mm,
and I've had conversations with good friends and family members about this, and essentially it comes down to, look, I just don't care. I don't care about this. This
I
makes me
know that you talk about human behavior. How does human behavior, link into that world of entrepreneurship and feast and famine, and how that plays with people's psyche?
sure, a couple different ways. One way is understanding other individuals, not only from a personal perspective, but also from a business perspective. Business is about relationships. When you have a relationship with your customers, with your prospects, with the people that you work with. So by understanding people better in those areas, you could better, I guess, create a business, create policies, whatever that solidify those relationships. So if you know consumers better, you could be better at marketing. Consumer behavior is a big part of marketing your product or service. So that's definitely one area.
What's your biggest, well, not yours, but what are people's the biggest misconception about AI?
Well, I think that it's incredibly dangerous and it's scary. I think that's the biggest misconception. It has the potential to be dangerous.
Hmm.
I sort of see it kind of like a knife. You could heal with it in a surgeon's hand, or you could kill somebody with it. That's it. It has the potential to be dangerous, but it's important.
Hey, family, this is the Thrive Word Journey. Look, life's too short to just get by, and 2025 is the year to persist. We're here to grow, build, and thrive. This podcast is all about powerful stories, real talk, and practical steps to help you level up in every area of your life. Now, if that sounds like something you need, don't just watch, be a part of the journey. Let us know you're here. Do us a favor. If you're listening on the podcast platform, download the episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode. And as we always say, let's make thriving our new norm.
Beat up, bullied, and dunked on. Beat up, bullied, and dunked on. Bullied and dunked on. Let's get it.
And welcome back to another episode of the Thrive Journey. Today, we're diving deep into the mind of Dr. Bennett, an entrepreneur, psychologist, AI innovator, and even a comedy creator. From building a 20 million business to mastering the science of success, Bo knows what it takes to create a business that truly reflects values. And we'll explore psychology, AI, and how critical thinking can shape your success. So get ready for an insightful and entertainment conversation that might just change the way you think about building a business. And we're talking about, the title From Zero to 20 Million, the psychology of success and business growth. And again, I just want to say thank you for being on the episode. How you doing? And you want to go by Bo and not Dr. Bennett, right?
That's right. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Diving into what you know and why we have you here, I just want to go back a little bit. And I know that you have a strong or had a strong drive for success from a young age, right? What fueled that ambition?
Well, it was mostly the environment in which I grew up. My parents were both entrepreneurs. My
Oh, nice.
brother had his own screen printing business. My sister had her own real estate business. So I really grew up in that environment. I didn't know anything else. In fact, it was kind of a running joke in our family. I didn't understand at a young age why my friends' parents wouldn't be there all day. Like the father would go away in the morning and come back in the day. My parents and my whole family, everybody worked from home. So I
Oh, nice.
didn't understand that concept until I was a little bit older. But I think that's whether it be partly genetic or environmental, it was just kind of ingrained in me from a young age.
Yeah. So did you have any financial struggles growing up in that world?
Yes, and I'll explain that. We were probably like a middle class family, upper middle class, maybe depending in the 70s and 80s what that actually meant. I mean, our house was generally a little bit bigger and nicer than most of my friends' houses, but my father had an interesting career. He was an inventor, which means he got paid when he sold an invention.
Hmm.
So we would go through these cycles, these times when we had plenty of money and things were great and we'd go on vacations. And then we would be in these times of like drought where my parents would constantly be fighting about money and like couldn't get new clothes. And I mean, it was really tough for these times. So I experienced what it was like to have a lot of money. And I also experienced what it was like to struggle. And I definitely liked having the more money better.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that was the world of feast and famine is what's playing in my mind, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah, and as entrepreneurs, that's a story that I hear a lot, you know. One month you're doing well, the next month it's a struggle, and it plays with you. But as an entrepreneur, we just stick it out and do the
Yeah.
best we can.
Well, I don't think that most people get to appreciate that. I think most people live in a pretty stable environment, and most kids grow up in a fairly stable environment. I mean, sure, they may have parents that lose jobs and times get tough, but for the most part, it's they don't experience that. So if you don't experience like the wealth or the abundance, you don't know what you're missing really. So you don't develop that drive for it. So I'm not saying that's 100% of the time, but that definitely has something to do with it. I do notice that people who do have these kind of cycles,
Yeah,
they tend to be very motivated in life.
yeah. And that kind of leads me into one of your specialties, which is psychology. I know that you talk about human behavior. How does human behavior, link into that world of entrepreneurship and feast and famine, and how that plays with people's psyche?
Sure, a couple different ways. One way is understanding other individuals, not only from a personal perspective, but also from a business perspective. Business is about relationships. When you have a relationship with your customers, with your prospects, with the people that you work with. So by understanding people better in those areas, you could better, I guess, create a business, create policies, whatever that solidify those relationships. So if you know consumers better, you could be better at marketing. Consumer behavior is a big part of marketing your product or service. So that's definitely one area. The other area is sort of what we already covered, and that's having like the mental stability to be an entrepreneur, to be able to go through these cycles where things are really great and then things aren't so great, to be able to accept a level of risk and understand that when things go bad, it's not the end of the world. And there are brighter times ahead. It's kind of like a mental resilience, and psychology plays an important part in that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, many episodes, or I wouldn't say many, but some of the episodes that we talked about mental resilience, that's something that really plays a lot with entrepreneurs and how they approach, their business and how they sustain, who they continue to be to make sure their businesses continues to grow. You talked about common like cognitive bias. What is that? And then what's a common cognitive bias that trips people up in their decision making?
So cognitive bias is basically like a mental shortcut. They're shortcuts that we take in order to just make it through the day, to think better. We have like two basic kinds of reasoning. We have like the system one, system two reasoning. System one would be like the really fast type of kind of quick instinctual, if you want to call it that type of reasoning. And this is where we find a lot of the cognitive biases because we kind of jump to conclusions. But we need this in order to get through the day because the system two processing is much more deliberate. It's when you stop and kind of like sit down and carefully think about every decision, critically think about things, how like what happens if I go this way, what will happen if I go the other way. Think about like the sources where the information is coming from. So it's deliberate, it's slow, it's cognitively expensive, meaning that it takes a wear and tear on you. You can't do that constantly because you just don't have the mental energy, or it burns more calories like
Right.
physically as well. So in order to get through the day, we have developed as humans to have this quick type of thinking where we make these judgments based on heuristics. They're sort of like good enough. So for most of the time, it works extremely well, but sometimes it doesn't. A good example might be if you're meeting someone for the first time, we have these first impressions, right?
Hmm.
And most of the time that works well because people generally whoever they are, they're usually representative of who they are the majority of the time. But we know some people have like really bad days. Some people just aren't feeling well. So if you meet somebody on one of those bad days, then they may be really short. They just got out of a meeting where they got fired or something like that. And you form this impression of them, then you could be completely wrong. That's not who the person is. That's just who they were in that moment. But most of the time, again, that works. So it's a system. It's like a cognitive system in place that does us good in the long run, but not for every specific information. So that's where cognitive biases come in. Cognitive biases are kind of like these shortcuts that work and they have a function. But when it comes to like careful decision making, then we need to be aware of the biases and we need to kind of activate that system too, that slower, deliberate thinking in order to make the best and the better decisions. So you asked about in decision making, like what is a cognitive bias? The most common one is called the confirmation bias. And that's when we tend to accept information that works well with our goals and our beliefs. And we reject information, or we're a lot more critical of information that doesn't make us feel good, that hurts us in some way. So this is big, like in politics. You know, if you hear something on the news that's maybe really bad for the president, and you don't like the president, you automatically accept it. You don't care
Hmm.
about the source. You don't. It's just like, yeah, sure, I believe that. Why not? But if you really like the president and you hear something bad, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't know. I don't buy that. And all of a sudden, you're very critical about everything. So that's a perfect example of like a cognitive bias. And by not accepting information so easily, we find ourselves, or we can put ourselves in better position by activating that level two and thinking more critically. And in the long run, we just make better and better decisions. And of course, that's what brings us closer to success.
Do you think that, I hate to generalize or even say most, but do you think that most people stop at the good enough and
Yes.
don't move into the critical thinking era? And if that's so, why is that?
Well, it's tiring. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of effort, and people don't care. We have this bias where we want to feel good about ourselves.
Okay.
And again, information that doesn't make us feel good about ourselves, we don't like it, so we tend not to search that kind of information out. So when we hear information that makes us feel good, we accept it and we say that's good enough. That's good enough for me. I heard it from this one guy who just happened to tell me, I watched something on a YouTube channel and this guy on the YouTube channel said something that comports with my beliefs, so that's enough proof for me. Of course, we know from a critical thinking standpoint that's horrible. You
Hmm.
don't get your information from YouTube. You need to, like, you can get the information there, but then you got to verify the sources from
Yeah.
other sources of information and make sure
Right.
that what you heard is actually true. But when we don't want it to be false, we don't need that level of confirmation. We don't seek out that level of confirmation. In fact, we like actively reject that level of confirmation, which puts us in a bad position of accepting a lot of false information.
It's dangerous. Or
Yes.
it can be dangerous. Then how would what would be the message for people to really get past that space? Like, it's good enough. I'll go to YouTube, which of course this is on, and say, I heard what he said. I need to find some other sources. Like, there's an energy that has to be there for people to say, let me go here and check this out. Let me go ahead and check this out. And not just this 10-second blip or blurb or whatever of this information that I found that I might agree with, but may be false.
And the energy you're talking about is desire. It's that simple. You have to want to know what's true. You have to be the kind of person that says, I want to know what's true. I want to accept more true things and reject more false things. That's the kind of person I am. You have to basically build your identity around that. And that's where like identity politics comes into play and becomes a problem as well. If we're a diehard leftist or a diehard rightist, or if we're very religious in one area, whatever, if we have like strong ideological beliefs, that's when we get into the most trouble, because we want those beliefs to be supported. We create our own identity based on those beliefs. So somebody may say, like, I am a Christian. That's who I am. I am a liberal. That's who I am. Then if you find out that your beliefs might be wrong or problematic, all of a sudden your identity is being destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's incredibly painful and tough for so many people. So my advice is lose the labels, get rid of the identity. Of course, you could have any belief you want, like religious or political, that doesn't matter. But be the kind of person, if somebody says, who are you? Bo, describe yourself as a person. I would say, like, I'm the kind of person who likes to believe as many true things as possible and reject as many false things. I am a critical thinker. That's my identity. That's what I embrace. And now I could use that to freely evaluate any claim that's thrown at me in the social, the political, or the religious, or the business domains. And it doesn't matter. I don't care about the outcome, because I'm not connected to those outcomes in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
My only thing that I care about is being a good critical thinker.
When I was listening to you, what I was hearing is that people are so attached to who they think they are or who they believe they are, because that's what their identity is to them. And if they lose their identity, then who are they? But it's like you said, it's important to have critical thinking skills, simply to really find what's factual and what's non-factual.
And the solution isn't to lose your identity. It's just to change your identity, to rethink about the kind of person you are and who you are as a person. And basically, you give yourself an identity based on, you could base your identity on values, but more specific values instead of like labels. Like, so for example, you wouldn't say, if you say like, I'm conservative, that's a conservative is one of my values. No, forget about that. That's a label. And there's a lot of baggage that comes along with that. So don't say that. Say like, I really value freedom, and then maybe even more specific. That's okay. And also know that it's okay to change your values. I think one of the big problems that we get in when we're talking about when we have like moral debates or political debates is people think in black and white, which again is another bias, black and white thinking. People tend to think in black and white, like there's just two sides of issues, when that's not the case. It's like, okay, I value my freedom, but I also value safety. And we know, like in the political arena, those two are often at odds, right? Like, how safe do you want to be? Like, how much privacy do you want to have? Like, which is probably the freedom domain, versus how safe do you want to be? Like, do you want the government spying on you if it means it could save 1 million lives a year? So there's like pros and cons, and you have to think about all these things in a like a rational, critical way, and understand that they're not binary. And you could value multiple things at once.
Yeah.
And based on who we are as a person, who we are genetically and environmentally, how we grew up, we may value things differently. So one of my good friends may value freedom a little bit more than I do. I may value safety a little bit more, and that's okay. A lot of times when we get down to that, like the nitty gritty there's no way of really quantifying who is right. It's more of just a feeling,
Yeah.
like an attitude, and there's nothing wrong with that. And we have to accept that and understand that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, doesn't that come with just how people feel? Because people are definitely connected or attached to their feelings about certain things, topics,
And that
areas.
gets into a really interesting philosophical debate because ultimately everything comes down to a feeling.
Hmm.
And we don't have to get into that now, but if you think about it, like, well, why this? Why do I want this policy to be enacted? If you keep on just digging down, it comes down to, well, I just feel that this is better than that.
Hmm.
So to make like perfectly rational decisions is almost impossible. There's an element of feeling, of value, of something subjective in there that we can't quite quantify, but we can still make rational decisions, but we have to understand that element exists, and we have to be able to explain it, like why I think my idea or my way is better than yours.
For anyone listening to this, like how can they train themselves to think more critically in this era? Because it seems like, well, not even seem like, but there is a lot of misinformation that's happening. So since we're talking about feelings, you get this information, you're so attached to this feeling of what this information or misinformation would be, and then it kind of clouds the thinking. So how does one train themselves to become more more of a critical thinker?
Yeah, it comes back to desire again. And I hate to say it because the hard fact is very few people desire this, statistically speaking. And we know this. I mean, we could look at our recent history, and there are things that people like, it's so clearly false information, but by believing it and accepting it, these people believe that good things will come to them, so they don't care.
Mm,
And I've had conversations with good friends and family members about this, and essentially it comes down to, look, I just don't care. I don't care about this. This makes
I
me happy. That's all that I care about. What needs to happen is, and usually people do go experience this at one point or another, they just have to recognize it. When they accepted something uncritically because it made them feel good at the time, because they thought they were going to get something in return that was going to be good, and they realized they got the shaft, right?
right.
They realized that, oh, they were sold a bag of goods that they didn't get. They got conned, they got scammed. That's when critical thinking, the desire for critical thinking kicks in. And without that, it's really not going to happen because there's just not enough motivation for it. So people have to realize that they've got to feel it, like viscerally. They got to feel like, I cannot believe I fell for this.
Hmm.
I cannot believe I went down this path. I made these decisions. I voted in a certain way. I did whatever because I believed all this. And now look at where we are. Look at what's happening to me because of it. And it's moments like that where people all of a sudden start questioning their beliefs and become critical thinkers. So that's what we need as a society.
Will it take a serious moment for someone to wake up to that critical thought process? Like, why wouldn't it happen before?
Because people don't care. And that's it. If you don't have a reason to accept critical thinking and start thinking critically, then why bother? I think people like to just say that they're critical thinkers, and I think if it's like you ask somebody if they have a sense of humor. "Oh, of course, I got a great sense of humor." Everybody says that. It's that whole idea that everybody thinks they're better than 50% of all the drivers. That can't statistically be true, but virtually everybody says that. Same thing with critical thinking. Virtually everybody thinks that they're a good critical thinker, but the statistics are no. Half the population is below 50% in terms of critical thinking abilities. That's a statistical fact. There's no changing that. And in order to move yourself up, I mean, yes, there is some like inherent ability. Some people are more logical thinkers than other, like mathematicians and
Right.
logicians and so forth. But that's not what we're talking about. You don't have to be like the top 1%. You just need to make that conscious desire to improve your critical thinking. And all it really takes, again, is just to realize that you're not thinking clearly, and you're using too much emotion, and you need to stop. You need to take a step back, and you need to like engage that critical thinking in these important decisions in life. Not everything. You're going to buy a cereal at the shopping center, or at the grocery store. You don't have to make a spreadsheet of which you get Captain Crunch or Count
That's
Chocula. You just
yeah,
pick one that you like, right?
yeah, that's definitely emotion right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fruity Pebbles taste better than Tricks.
Oh, I love Fruity Pebbles.
It's the whole psychology of people in relationships. And is there a way to like, psychologically trick people to like, let's say it like this way. Is there a psychological trick that successful entrepreneurs can use to stay ahead of, just stay ahead and not be so drawn in by the emotions?
Yes, there's, if you want to call them psychological tricks, because they
That's just a
could
word
be,
I just came up
and
with.
that's fine. That's fine. That word actually does describe what I'm talking about. And these are persuasion techniques. If
Okay.
you've heard of those before, like how to persuade people. Salespeople are trained in some different persuasion techniques. Marketing is filled with persuasion techniques, and some of them are more like gimmicky, and they're just like there's no real science behind them, where others have been proven and demonstrated time and time again. Like the foot in the door technique is one that immediately comes to mind. When you ask somebody for like a small favor, and they'll do the favor for you, and then you follow up with a bigger favor, like a bigger request, and they're far more likely to do it because they see themselves now as the kind of person who will help you, because they helped you with something small, and then they'll help you with something bigger.
Mm,
Salespeople would use this technique. They do it in marketing, but there's like a whole host of these persuasion techniques that are really good to know, because persuasion is incredibly important. And it's not just about like selling people something. It's about basically getting people. You could look at it two ways. One is manipulation,
yeah.
which could be, I mean, the difference between persuasion and manipulation, it's kind of like there's a thin line there, and it's kind of subjective. But the way I see it is, when you manipulate somebody, you get somebody to do something that you want them to do specifically. When you persuade somebody, you get somebody to do what they should do for themselves. And
Okay.
if that benefits you, great. You get them to make a better decision. So that's what I like to think is more like ethical persuasion in psychology, and this could relate to all areas of business as well. If you know something's good for somebody, if you have a product that so many people use, and they do incredibly well, and it makes their lives easier and makes them more successful, then of course you want to share that with other people. So you want to persuade people to get over those bridges that are like holding them back, and you want to help them get over that in order to buy your product or your service or whatever. And that's where persuasion techniques could come in handy.
Good deal. Because that's when you're talking about that, I was thinking about, a lot of businesses are online now and they use these funnels. And the funnels are, they may give them a free thing that leads them to something else. That's, either it's a free thing that goes to a small price of something, but then it leads them into, whatever their grand thing is. And I think, well, that's just how things are going now. Do you see the value in the ethics in funnels?
Yes, I see both. The value, definitely the value of doing that, because to get somebody, let's say that you are a consultant, or you're doing a seminar that costs like $3,000 for 1 day session.
Hmm.
You can't just tell people, hey, my name's Bo and I charge $3,000 for an 8-hour day. Come see me at the Marriott. That's not going to go over too well. But if you say, hey, here's my book that I wrote, go ahead. It's an ebook. Take it for free. Read it. See if you like what I say. And then, if you do, I got this online course you could take for $100. And this gets into more detail and it tells more about what you need to know. And then say, hey, you like the course? Great. Well, now you could, if you got the money and you got the desire, I'm teaching over at the Marriott, for $3,000. So it kind of leads them down that path, but it does so in a way where they know what they're getting into. They're not coming in cold. So that's where I see it as like an ethical way of doing it. Again, if done correctly.
If done correctly. What's up, Thrival Journey listeners and watchers? Look, if you're someone with big dreams of entrepreneurship but need a flexible way to earn income while building your business, let me tell you about the Orions Group. Through our partnership with Arise Virtual Solutions, you can become a customer support professional, aka CSP, and start earning from home on your own terms. Arise offers a streamlined certification process, getting you trained and ready to work with well-known brands all across America. You can set your own hours, choose the clients you want to work with, and create a work-life balance that fits your entrepreneurial goals. The best part, you don't have to choose between your side gig and your business dreams. Being a CSP with the Orions Group means you can bring in extra income while have the flexibility to focus on growing your own venture, much like I did. Whether you're looking to supplement your income or need a bridge while building your empire, this is the opportunity for you. You interested? If so, head over to www.theorionsgroup.com to learn more about becoming a CSP with the Orions Group. Look here. Support your entrepreneurial journey while supporting the Thrival Journey podcast at the same time. All right, one more time, www.theorionsgroup.com. All right, we're done with the spot. Let's get back to the podcast. Yeah, and there's, the good, funnels, and I've seen some not so good funnels. I just call them bad. They're just bad funnels.
Sure.
So you just have to be aware of those, and that's where the critical thinking comes from. Because, in emotion, you may go down a funnel and be like, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good. Then again, you get to the final, then you're back to, I've been sold a bill of goods. And then, from that experience, you're probably more aware.
Yeah, and more critical.
And more
Definitely.
critical.
There's one thing that I am thinking of, like when it comes to the funnels, and it's kind of like watching a series, like a TV series, where there's always questions for each episode. And then you're saying, okay, maybe they're not going to get answered this episode. Maybe they'll get answered in this season, right? And then the end of the season
Right.
comes and, oh, they're not answered yet. But the end of the series, I'm going to stick with it. And then the end of the series comes and they don't get answered. You're like, what did I just spend 8 years watching? It's like that with these funnels. Sometimes I see like a promise being made, like this is what you're going to get out of it. This is what's going to happen. Here's where all the things, and like, okay, the free thing didn't get me that. Maybe the next one will. Okay, that didn't get me. Maybe the next one will. There's always that promise that you're going to get something that you never end up getting, and then you eventually pay the $3,000. And yeah, it's like I've never done this before, but I heard the story. You probably know who Anthony Robbins is, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he does these seminars and he charges like probably $3,000. I don't know what they are, but they're really expensive, like the live in-person ones. And from what I heard from many people and read online as well, is that there's a money back guarantee. If you want your money back, if you feel like you didn't get the value, they send you into this room like after the event, because that's what you have to do. And then in the room comes Anthony Robbins, and basically you have to ask him for your money back. And he's there to convince you that, no, you don't want your money back. And of course, you're so starstruck and, embarrassed that you don't ask for your money back. You don't demand it. And that's how they make their money. Is that ethical? I don't think so. But, I like Anthony Robbins, so I'll give him a pass.
You said you like him, so you give him a pass? No, I think that the people that go in the room, that's probably the same thing that they'll say.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. He's a good guy. I'll give him a pass for this. But I think you kind of know what you're getting yourself into with those type of things.
Yeah, I agree. And just to kind of do a little shift here, I have a question here. Talking about AI, future of technology. Me personally, I use AI, and I think AI for information is good. I do services with AI. Some of them I do voice things for, and things like that. And you run several websites that use AI, and it's a lot of stuff a lot of things going on with AI. What excites you or doesn't excite you about AI right now?
Virtually everything excites me about AI right now. Watching it develop, and I've been there from the beginning of the commercialization of AI and signed up for it, and seeing how it's progressing and what you can do with it and how companies are using it. And mostly all of these ideas that I have, like how it could be used, how it could make people's lives easier and better. It's just so darn exciting. And it's literally hard for me to sleep at night because thinking about all the things that I could be doing and
Yeah,
could be building, it's just like I just don't have enough time in the day to do all this
I
stuff.
hear you.
Even with AI helping me and doing 90% of the work,
Yeah,
it's still difficult, but it's really exciting. And I think that I am an optimist by nature, I think. So I do believe that it is going to make our lives better in so many ways. And of course, there is the downside as well, like misinformation, deep fakes, um, and just AI being used for like hacking and doing bad things.
hmm
But I do believe that there are far more good people in the world than there are bad people. And for that reason, far more good people are going to be in charge of powerful AI than far more bad people will, or than more bad people will. Therefore, you're going to have like kind of like AI wars in a
I was about to say a little war off.
yeah, where you have it's just kind of like we have now with hackers. There's like you have your community of I don't want to use hackers like crackers, I guess is the um,
Or for the back.
for people who are bad hackers, right?
Okay.
Who like crack
Okay.
code.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm clear now.
yeah. And
Can, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, so like them, you have like the bad AI and you have all the good AI fighting the bad AI, and like right now, the good ethical hackers are essentially keeping everything working properly and functioning because of security and constantly building up security, even though you constantly have like the bad unethical hackers trying to get in there and break things and steal things. So I think the same thing we're going to be seeing with AI in the future development. And I think that the good is going to overcome the bad because that's our human nature. Our human nature is to be more good than bad.
Yeah. As you were describing it and talking about it, the thing that came to my mind with AI, the war, the possible war, whatever, was we have the internet, right? And then you have the dark web.
Yeah.
So those two things definitely, that they're present, but you have the good things fighting against the dark web and all that kind of stuff, that those shenanigans I call them. Yeah. What's your biggest, what, not yours, but what are people's the biggest misconception about AI?
Well, I think that it's incredibly dangerous and it's scary. I think that's the biggest misconception. It has the potential to be dangerous.
hmm
I sort of see it kind of like a knife. You could heal with it in a surgeon's hand, or you could kill somebody with it. That's it. It has the potential to be dangerous, but it's important. And it's something that you shouldn't be afraid of. It's something that you need to embrace. I feel like there are so many people who will be losing their jobs, their current jobs, because of AI. And therefore, they're automatically going to hate AI. And I think that's a problem. You can't do that. Just like if you were running a horse and buggy company 1900 and the cars were coming along, you can't be the guy who says, don't pay attention to these cars. They're demonic. They're going to
Right.
destroy the world.
Right.
You got to be the guy who says, I want one of these cars in part of my fleet. Let's bring one in. Let's bring a couple and we'll slowly replace them with the horse and buggies. That's the kind of person you need to be. So you need
hmm
to find out like how you can use AI to help you and to embrace it and be on the top of the curve. Ride the wave. Don't be in the back part of it when you get drowned by it.
Right. Right. And this question is for people who are, in business. They're fighting the AI, since we're talking about it now. First of all, let's be honest. Can I truly replicate human creativity or replace human behavior or humans, period?
I guess that's, I don't know how to answer that question because it depends on how you judge it. I believe that like AI passes the Turing test. Have you heard of that? Like from Alan Turing when he was interacting with like this, like a computer to see like if it passes as like a human, and it didn't, back then, but it does now.
Okay. This is new
That's
to me.
kind of yeah, that's kind of important. That's kind of an important milestone. And I'm not exactly sure like what actually passed. Like, does the regular ChatGPT pass these days? Like when you can't tell the difference if you're talking to a real person, you're chatting with a real person. In terms of, and here's where we get into philosophy and a little bit of psychology, but I think this is an important concept and an interesting one as well. It's that when you think about like what artificial intelligence is, it's basically just non-biological intelligence.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is, how do we know what we know? Like me and you, like how do we know these things? We didn't. I didn't make up these words that I'm speaking. This is words that other people have said and taught me, and
We
and I
learn.
just put them in order, like the order in order to make up my own thoughts. And how about the thoughts that I'm having? I'm constantly influenced by everything I see in the world and TV, the comedy that I wrote. You can look and you could see the influences there from like The Office, one of my favorite sitcoms, Dodgeball, the movie Dodgeball.
Hmm.
You could see a lot of like the similar humor. I might have written like the specific jokes with the specific circumstances, but all of that is really just everything that I've learned in life
Yeah.
that has come together. I've taken all that information and I've put it in like in my own order, if you will,
Hmm.
in order to become me, like the person I am. So is AI really any different? I mean, AI takes the cumulative knowledge of all the information it has and it could come up with unique things. It writes songs, it writes like music, notes, jokes, like everything that are completely original. Like, isn't that creativity? And how is that actually different from our creativity?
Hmm.
I think it's just a matter of degree. And there's also a bias there, like a human bias. Like we put humans on this pedestal, especially if you have like religious beliefs. Like there's like some kind of like divine status associated with humans, and everything else is something else. Like whether it
Hmm.
be animals or unfortunately, some people think other countries and other races or whatever have like a different status because of whatever their beliefs. But if you think about who we are, and if you do kind of like accept more naturalistic type of view of who we are and how we became who we are, you could easily see how artificial intelligence is really in that same boat, if you will, and how it's not much different than we are. We've been around for millions of years, or at least hundreds of thousands of years. And AI has been around for what, maybe a decade in its earliest form.
Yeah.
And look at
Maybe.
how far it's come. So where's
Wait.
it going to be in a year? Where's it going to
Yeah.
be in 10 years? I mean, boom, mind blowing to think where it is.
It is because I mean, it was like he just came on the scene, and then where it is now is like, you know, some people like myself in business and things like that. We're still trying to catch up to it, and it's moving faster than I am, but
Yeah.
it's okay because I think because I have a personality where like I'm open to it. Like at first I was like, oh, this is kind of crazy, but it's not. I mean, it may be,
It is
but
crazy. There's nothing
yeah, okay. Well,
like every definition of the word. It's crazy.
yeah, yeah, and but it does serve a purpose, and hopefully that it just continues to serve a purpose that makes us as a human race, better. And with business, how does one in business use AI to advance itself with value?
Well, I would say the best way to do this is use AI to ask it. So go into ChatGPT or whatever chat that you like to use AI. that you like to use and say, here is what I do. I am a whatever. I'm an entrepreneur who runs a real estate company. I do this, whatever. You tell exactly what you do and you say, how can AI help me in what I do? Mind blown already. You'll see the response and then you could just keep on drilling down. And that's how you start. That's how you get started. And you won't believe like, oh, wow, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And you can go in and do the things that you need to do that can curtail to, your experience and your purpose and things like that. But you, as a younger person, I don't know how old you are now, you've sold your first company at age 29 for 20 million. Can you explain that story? Talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, that was my first large company, or the way I like to word it is my first company of significant value. I sold that. So just to give you some history behind that, I probably had like 10 different businesses before that.
Wow.
Like they weren't all official businesses, but they were like business ventures or whatever. And like none of them did well. The last one I had before that, I actually paid my way through college with it. So it was doing
Mm.
well, but I ended up taking on a client who ended up ripping me off, scamming me of several $100,000.
Oh,
So I
man.
ended up having to sell the business for $1 to my partner who took on that debt, and I got out of it.
That's a big lesson, right?
It's a lesson, of course, and we talked about like how you become more critical after you get scammed and conned, and that certainly happened.
Perfect scenario.
Yeah. So when I started the web hosting business, that was back in 1994, and it was the perfect time. I was in the perfect situation. I just graduated college, so I had a little money left over. I had no debt. I could still like live with my parents if I wanted to. So I was in the perfect place to take a risk. And it was just when like people started finding out about the internet, like what the internet was. And I was fascinated because I grew up like having with computers and doing programming and stuff. So I was kind of like, it was kind of a natural fit for me, even though I went to school for marketing. So that's how I started. I started a first web hosting company, and it was one of the
And that,
first ones out there. I grew it. I grew it with like an affiliate program before Amazon had their affiliate program. So it caught on, and it wasn't like a straight climb up either. Despite how successful it ultimately was when I sold it, there were a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of times in that 6 year approximately time frame when I was thinking, "Oh, geez, am I going to make it next month?" Is I'm in big trouble here,
mhm,
especially with like all the technical and hardware issues and the downtime. And I mean, it
I
was
can
a different
imagine.
internet back then.
Oh yeah, I dial up. Is that
Yeah,
does that ring a bell?
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, and so it was the perfect storm of factors that allowed me to start that company and sell it for when I did.
That's pretty extraordinary. Now, if these days, I mean, internet is different. And, we fast paced things. We have things are fiber optic and all that wonderful stuff. Uh, no longer AOL. Well, there's AOL. I mean, it's
Yeah,
still
it's
around.
still there.
It's
It
still
won't
there.
die. I tell people,
Forget.
get rid of it. There's something better, but they don't listen.
Right. If someone wanted to start a business today, like what's a good first step for anyone who's really looking at starting their own business?
Well, most people will tell you, do what you love. Find something that you love doing and do that. I think that's stupid advice. And the reason is because most people love things that don't make money, right?
Right.
I mean, I love tons of things that will never make a penny and are
Mhm.
unlikely to make a penny. But people hear those one story, like that one story where somebody, like Jim Henson is a wonderful example. Jim Henson loved puppets. He always loved performing with puppets. And he became, multi-billionaire or however much he made and incredibly famous and
Mhm.
changed the world with his puppets. But he's like the one guy, in history
Yeah.
who would
Well,
do that
that's the only one I can really think of, except for that guy that walks around with
with
the
puppets.
dog.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, but for the most part, for most people, like unless you're willing to take that 1 in a billion shot and you're willing to accept those odds and you're willing to accept failure, then you might want to think about a combination of doing something that you hopefully love, but something that you at least really enjoy, something that kind of that gets you excited. That's good enough. And something that also has marketing potential. That's the key. It has to have marketing potential. And how do you know that? Well, I guess you give it a shot. You see what the interest is, you see what happens. And if it doesn't work out, then not a big deal. Change courses, find something else.
Find something else. Yeah.
But specifically focusing on doing what you love, bad advice.
What's a belief that you once had about success that later you changed your mind about it?
Oh boy, I was big into all the self-help books and the gurus, and that's how I know people like Anthony Robbins, Dennis Waitley, Zig Ziglar, Les Brown. I know all those guys.
We're in the same vein.
Yeah, right. And I got to tell you, to this day, you know, they're incredibly motivating.
Hmm.
They're inspiring. It's like the human psyche likes to hear that stuff. We like to associate with energetic people with charisma, people like just listen to them talk about anything. It doesn't matter. It's like you feel that, you feel the energy and it builds you up as well.
Hmm.
So there's something to that. But what I discovered, you know, after some schooling and a PhD in psychology, that a lot of what they actually say is complete nonsense in terms of like the content itself.
Okay.
It's mostly like pseudoscience in a way, or just like completely wrong, made up facts. I think it was I think it was Zig Ziglar. I don't want to pin this on him if it wasn't him, but you could look this up. Your listeners could look this up. Like in one of the speeches he gave, one of his famous recordings or whatever, he talked about this statistic between Yale, like people who set goals 20 years later, they made like $200,000 more on average versus the people who didn't set goals. And that was like motivating. Like, wow, I could see the power of setting goals.
Okay.
The
Get those
problem
goals set.
is
Yeah.
it was completely and totally made up. There was like I think it was Fast Company who actually did the research. They had a whole team of researchers go in there, call Zig Ziglar's foundation and his people and say, you know, where did this come from? They couldn't find it. They looked up like all the records of Harvard and Yale. They couldn't find anything. It was completely and totally made up. And that's not just to say like this is a one secluded instance. I mean, that's just what they do. If it sounds good and it makes you feel good, that's usually good enough for people. And that's why the self-help motivational industry does so well, because it makes people feel good, even though it's not completely factual. So overall, like in general, I kind of learned to separate that information from what I now kind of look at, and that's called positive psychology. And that's like the science of the good aspect of psychology. Most psychology is focused on like what hurts us, you know, mentally, like the deficiencies we have, psychological
Hmm.
deficiencies, where positive psychology focuses on that opposite. It's more like the self-help. It's like what makes us great.
Hmm.
And it looks at case studies and it looks at like experiments and all that stuff. So I would encourage anybody who really likes the success gurus like I do to transition from them to the science of positive psychology. You'll get the same benefits, plus you'll get the truth, and more accurate information, which is
How does someone get connected with someone who actually practices positive psychology?
you just Google positive psychology. I think you'll find tons of books on it, courses, everything.
Though talking about positive psychology, just coming up with a question, does it change your habits or daily practices? And does that help impact what you do daily for your personal growth?
It's hard to tell. It's hard to pin any cause on a certain effect. So I could tell you I feel like it does.
Hmm.
And I think that's the best I could say.
That's the best you can say. Okay. Hey, I like the truth. I like the truth. So you worked in businesses, psychology, AI, comedy. What's next for you?
I still have AI tunnel vision, basically.
Okay. That's what
Like
I
I
could
mentioned,
kind of
there's
tell from the conversation.
so much that I want to do with AI. Got a huge laundry list of ideas. So I'm going to keep working on that until something better comes along, or
I
until
understand.
I'm motivated to take a different course. But that's what I'm doing now.
Nice. I liked it. I like that. What's a an unconventional piece of advice that you would like people to hear?
Well, I think the best unconventional piece is the piece I already touched on, and that's you feel like you want to follow your dreams and follow what you love doing. Rethink that idea. You could be an unsuccessful, unemployed person who's doing what they love doing. And let me clarify that too. I don't want to sound like a greedy, rich Scrooge guy when it's all about money. If you don't care about money and you don't care about financial success, then by all means, go ahead, play with your puppets. Write that song, do whatever you want to do. But if you're looking specifically for something that has marketing potential, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, then rethink, reshape your dreams, your goals, your hobbies, the things you love doing, and connect them to something that has marketing potential, and then follow that.
Follow that. I like that. You currently have 10 businesses, or is that true? Is that accurate?
Well, it depends how you define a business. I have dozens of websites.
Websites.
Each website is like, yes, essentially a different business, but it all falls under my main company, Archie Boy Holdings, which is a holding company for all the different websites and businesses that I have. So to answer your question in short, I would say yes.
Same here. So I understand. So how do people get in touch with you, and how do you connect with people?
Well, you could go to, if you're interested in the businesses and what I'm doing, go to archieboy.com, archieboy.com. If you're interested in some of my writings and the books and psychology, motivation, success, critical thinking, you could find my books at bobennett.com. That's my personal website.
Perfect. It's been an interesting conversation. Like I'm full of questions right now, and I don't want to kill the time. What you had to share was, opening my mind to how psychology can work in my business, and just the fact of just being critically thinking in all that we do, separating my emotion to critical thoughts, and being able to move myself and my business forward. So I appreciate you being here. Do you have any last words?
The last words. These are the last words of the podcast, not of my life, I hope.
Of the podcast. That should have been a little more clear.
I hope when we're done here, I'll get out of here, and I'll keep doing other things. Well, I do have one other piece, some last words, and maybe unconventional advice, if you want to call it that as well. And that's this whole idea of, I'm just thinking, if I get into that, we're going to be talking for another 20 minutes. So I bet.
No, it's up to you. You'll have the last word, and we'll wrap it up with that.
Right. Yeah. I'll just give you something quick, and that's be flexible. That's what it's really about. It's about knowing when to change courses, knowing when to give up, and don't use the term give up, use it, change courses, because then we associate that with negativity, when in fact, so many people just kind of stick with the same thing, the same path, and it's not getting them where they want to be, but they have this desire, and it's ingrained, and they're brainwashed that giving up is failure and it's bad, when in fact it's often the good thing to do. If I didn't give up my graphic design business that wasn't doing too well, I would have never started the internet business, and I would have never been as successful as I was. So keep an eye out for opportunity, and be flexible, and know when to shift gears when needed.
What I'm hearing is okay to pivot. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you being here on the podcast. You have great information. And for all you watchers and listeners, you know that you can always connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and we'll have Bo's information in the description so you can be connected with Bo. Again, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Good talking to you.
You're welcome. And as we say about this time, make thriving your new normal.